Welcome back, you guys. We're going to continue the discussion on mass shootings, especially the aftermath of the Parkland, Florida shooting that was extremely devastating and is kind of inspiring a large dialogue, which is awesome.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about time on gun reform. And what we're going to kind of touch on now is continue our discussion that we talked about in the first segment about President Donald Trump's really call on, or his potential solution to now arming teachers and coaches with guns in schools, on school campuses. And, the question is, like, do teachers even want this? Now, with that, I'm going to read this tweet from Philip Clark. I'll read it for you guys. As a teacher, I knocked myself out, headbutting ceilings, pretending to be a particle, star jumping off a desk. I've set my arm on fire when lit ethanol trickled down my sleeve from my hand. I've burnt my ear listening if gas was coming out of a Bunsen. Please don't give me a gun. And that's what it is. Like, do teachers even, like, Donald Trump came out and said, well, hold on, let's even start, like, just arm teachers with it. And then teachers came back and were like, wait a minute, we don't even want to have these guns.
Don't want it, don't need it, aren't trained to do so. It just everything about that affirmation from Donald Trump, or that his quick fix to this is just it's truly childlike. It's ridiculous to think that arm me with time and resources to truly address the social and emotional needs of each of my students. That's what we need to do. I mean, the fact I'm just thinking back on my grade school, like, I would never want any of the teachers I ever known to have a gun.
And I would not feel safe. I'm not kidding you. In college, I took a class, and it was, I remember this feeling very vividly. And I'm someone I am very extremely sensitive to, like, being near a gun. I was not raised that way.
Right.
I'm just not comfortable with it. But we had this lecture, and we had a police officer come into the lecture, and he gave this topic discussion on being safe and about, like, drinking and whatever. So he came on stage. It was a 500 person lecture hall. Okay. And he's standing on stage, and and as sensitive as I am, like, him and this other officer both have guns on them. And I'm like, this is making me, like, so uncomfortable that the two of them have guns. Like, we're in a classroom. I was like, this really shouldn't even be here.
Right.
Like, this is supposed to be a safe space. And people have, like, counter arguments to this that, like, obviously they're trained and that's fine. But I just don't think, when I see guns in a classroom, the two make absolutely no sense. Like, there are far more other options for keeping a place safe.
Yeah, that's definitely not. That is definitely on the list, way down there, of potential fixes for this, and truly shouldn't even be on the list.
Yeah, and to think that, like, those were people that were properly trained to have it, and I felt uncomfortable. To think that a high school teacher of mine, a middle school teacher of mine, can carry a gun, like, I just would not feel comfortable.
Definitely not.
As a student, I'd feel more unsafe.
Not in the classroom, exactly. I would feel more unsafe. I mean, you hear about students overpowering teachers all the time. Can you only imagine if there was a weapon? Them knowing there was a weapon in there.
Exactly.
I mean, you see this all the time. Unruly students. They fight teachers. They're doing this. They're doing that.
And think about it for, like, a problem kid who almost would want to provoke an instance in where a teacher would have to then, like, pull out the gun.
Yes.
I think a kid would almost stage that entire act just so the gun could get whipped out, and then it's present.
Exactly.
It just escalates a situation far more than it de-escalates.
Yeah, like we talked about before, there's just too many things that could go wrong with guns in the classroom. There are too many factors that play into this that weren't
so many moving factors.
Impossible.
It would truly be a disaster.
Yes, agreed.
And I think that Donald Trump seeking that as a solution that's kind of dominating now the discussion that's kind of coming out of this is upsetting, because it's so, like, irrelevant to this. It's such an irrelevant solution.
It's really just to get the heads talking.
Yeah,
that's what it's for.
I agree.
I don't believe that even he. I mean, it's truly crazy to think that, does he even believe this? Does he even believe himself when he says these things? I find it hard.
Well, then, okay, so we're going to talk about...
I mean, I'm never surprised anymore with the things that he says, but in my head, I'm like, does he really believe that this is the answer?
Well, let's talk about a little bit of his statement in the same kind of press conference he held about... He had kind of the members of the families there and this kind of town hall discussion, but it was very small. I think that was the first time they actually let media in.
Yes.
I think they have these quite often after the shootings, and they let the cameras in on this, which I think was a great decision. But he mentioned that he would have ran in if he was a teacher or one of the, people...
Present.
If he was present in the
with
situation.
With or without a weapon. So he states. Laughable.
I'm sorry. Okay, so, right. This is what he said. So, he said, well, I'm going to read this entire thing. It's kind of like a meme. It says, everything's a lie, starting with, I would run, which, yes. Okay. So, Kayvon Shroff tweeted this as Trump on Florida school shooting. Quote, I really believe I'd run in there even if I didn't have a weapon, unquote. He dodged the draft 5 times. This, to me, when I heard that he had said that, and then I watched the clip of him actually saying it, it actually got me really upset because I was like, that's so disrespectful. Like, that's how little sensitivity Donald Trump as a human has and as a leader doesn't kind of lacks in understanding is you cannot say that. You were not there. You were not present. You have the fact that he can think that, when someone goes through a situation like this, the first thing you want to say to them is that I can't even imagine what you're going through. And then Donald Trump goes out there and then tries to imagine it.
Well, I mean, that's the sign of an egotistical maniac, which is what we're dealing with here.
It's absolutely true. I don't know. That statement in particular really triggered something with me that I thought was just so mismanaged as a leader. And I think we can even harp on there's an image of him at that same meeting of where he has this note card and you can see, and he's,
clearly
that's how
he has notes on how to deal with human emotion, which I find just hilarious.
Just, then you want to, as someone who thinks like President Barack Obama was the greatest man that ever lived,
right?
You want to compare how he dealt with it. And, he cries in front of the camera while speaking to the nation.
Actually went to the school. I mean, there's a difference. I mean, again,
Donald
Trump's an egotistical maniac. He obviously thinks very highly of himself. As the graphic showed, he dodged the draft 5 times. He's never ever seen war or anything on this kind of scale.
Which is why it's so upsetting for him to even think that, like, telling in front of victims, in front of families of children who have died
exactly
at the hands of, that incident. He goes and says that really like rash statement.
Well, the number one narrative for him is to make everything about himself, right? Yeah. That's what an egotist is.
I just think that is disgusting, quite frankly. That was my reaction.
Yeah, I was disgusted. I mean, just to say, to have no knowledge or experience in something and to just immediately state, well, I could do it, no problem.
And it's like, no one was asking you, bro. First and foremost, no one was asking if you could do it. That's not even like everything that comes out of his mouth with respect to this topic is so irrelevant to me. It's like you're missing, bro.
In a time where the president needs to be a strong character of emotion and a voice for change.
Exactly.
He always seems to drop the ball on it. Always seems to be more about what he would do in the situation, or it's crazy. Oh, here's the note card we have here.
What can I didn't even get to see some of the ones. It says, the first one, what would you most want me to know about your experience? Oh, what can we do to help you feel safe?
I believe the third one can't really read.
Fourth one, resources, ideas. And the fifth one, I hear you.
He couldn't memorize just dealing with human emotion and assuring citizens that we're here for them.
Like, I don't know. This to me also just goes to speak. This might be a little bit tangential, but just how forward thinking his administration is.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is the first time you're going to allow cameras into the room. And then this is how he, handles himself. It's like, what the hell, bro?
Unprepared.
Unprepared is probably the most
understatement. It's the biggest understatement.
But it's like preparedness is something that his administration entirely lacks. And when it comes to an issue so sensitive like this, that's where you cannot afford to lose on.
Right.
That's a front that you have to come in strong on.
Yeah, and then taking into context.
And then, right, you would think like that's preparedness. But it's like, bro, that's the first time you're letting cameras in the room. Like, let's just...
And then just touching briefly, taking into context what he was speaking of, I think he was talking about, he made another comment about that trained officer that was on at the school, I believe. He was a trained officer at Park, and that fact that he didn't go in calling him a coward. There you go. 3 sheriff's deputies remained outside school during Parkland shooting.
There's been a lot of backlash on that these sheriffs actually waited for the police department to show up before they even went into the campus.
Which I believe gives even more precedence to the fact of why would you arm teachers who are not trained for this type of behavior, when there are trained, deputies outside the school that didn't even want to go in.
I think there is so much criticism to these sheriff's deputies that didn't essentially in President Donald Trump's kind of take is that they didn't step up and they didn't show up. And
it's hard to say. I mean, when you're not there again.
Exactly. It's like you cannot say that, Donald Trump, that you would know what you would do in that situation because the human element, right? I think we were kind of talking about this off camera a little bit, but it's that you cannot. None of us really could ever really predict how we would react in that situation.
Exactly. It's impossible.
It is fight or flight intuition.
Right.
And no matter how trained you are, you're never really. These men were trained
and armed,
and yet they still didn't
react
in the way that we would have maybe hoped, or how President Donald Trump hopes teachers would react.
Exactly.
So why do you think that if these people were trained and this is their actual job, somehow where does that logic lie when you think that teachers are supposed to do the same when they're not trained?
It doesn't. It's illogical.
Exactly.
You have to realize also that they had handguns,
right,
as opposed to an AR-15. So that's another thing that you're hearing these shots going through
right. Well, exactly. What Gustavo was saying that these deputies probably heard, right? They know that the person
they know what
who's
an
here
AR-15
they know what an AR-15 sounds like, and they know that all they have prepared are handguns. So you're going to gauge that situation in that moment and think that really what is the likelihood I can actually stop this person with what I have. And if they have families, if they have children, maybe they think it's not worth the risk. And they're not going to go in. They'd rather wait for a full department to go in with that are actually prepared to do it. Now,
and teachers would probably think the same way. I mean, they would assume the same way. They have families. They have, they have aspirations. Why would they risk their life with the handgun when they hear about
it? Honestly, actually really frightens me to think that, I'm trying to imagine hearing that sound. Hearing an AR-15 go rounds and rounds going down.
You can. I mean, unless you're there, I truly believe it's impossible to really gauge
how you would react.
Or what you would react. I mean, there's really no telling.
And it's it really gets me upset because it's just a frightening thing to imagine. And I think I've actually spoken to a lot of my friends about this previously. And we've all kind of somehow imagined, what would you do? I've played it out in my mind when I was a student in college and I'd be in the library. And I would think to myself, what would happen right now if someone rolled up in here and started shooting?
With an AR-15. Is this an AR-15?
Yeah.
This is an AR-15 that you can legally buy here in the U.S. Legally. This is what you see in war. This is what you see in the Army. I mean, the fact that you can just walk around with this and legally purchase this is crazy. I mean, why would you need one of these?
Exactly. And that's something that where politicians are Marco Rubio are lacking that human understanding that's getting people so upset. It's no human, be a person for a second. And I think it's so upsetting because it's imagine if those were your children.
Right. That's the thing.
That was your community. You would care all of a sudden about this issue. We're going to jump into this clip of Cameron Kasky. He was one of the survivors of the Florida school shooting, and him at a town hall meeting with Marco Rubio, kind of asking some questions he wants answered.
Senator Rubio, can you tell me right now that you will not accept a single donation from the NRA in the future?
No, the answer to the question is that people buy into my agenda. And I do support the Second Amendment. And I also support the right of you and everyone here to be able to go to school and be safe. During my time there.
NRA money? More NRA money?
That is the wrong way to look. First of all, the answer is people buy into my agenda.
You can say no.
Number second, well...
Guys, if you...
Cameron is having a conversation with Senator Rubio. Let's let them talk.
Listen, I respect... You can ask that question, and I can tell you that people buy into my agenda.
So right now, in the name of 17 people, you cannot ask the NRA to keep their money out of your campaign?
I think in the name of 17 people, I can pledge to you that I will support any law that will prevent a killer like this.
No, but I'm talking NRA money.
No. Look, the First Amendment is as important as the Second. And therefore, you have every right to ask that question of me, and I'm here to tell you that I will stand for the things... Are you going to be accepting
money from the NRA in the future?
I've always supported... I will always accept the help of anyone who agrees with my agenda. I will do what I think is right. And if people want to support my agenda, they're welcome to do so, but they buy into my ideas. I don't buy into theirs.
Okay, so I knew that was going to happen. NRA, please just keep the money out of Rubio, okay? If he wants to run again, you guys...
Thank you, Cameron. Appreciate it.
That's really all you need to hear regarding this issue, right?
That was... I think that this is the clip that people needed to watch and hear after this because it's so correctly illustrated people's our frustration really with politicians. Call them out with the NRA money. At the end of the day, it's that's what's happening. You're accepting millions of dollars from NRA, claiming you're not influenced by that.
Claiming that money doesn't influence the
decisions. Your decisions and which laws you try and get passed.
I mean, it's really all in the if you look at the votes, it's really all in the votes. I mean, numerous gun reform legislation has tried to be passed, especially after school shootings in the past, and it's all been shut down by majority Republican Senate.
I think
that should tell you really exactly where these people stand.
It's been written about time and time again, especially after following these shootings, that the NRA has a heavy hand in politics.
They lobby, for the Second Amendment right or whatever. And like I said before, after school shootings, it's very stringent that these kinds of discussions come to the forefront, and they're immediately shut down because any legislation's always just doesn't pass for whatever reason.
And we're now even witnessing a lot of companies that are beginning to back out, and we're going to get a little bit into that in our third segment. Continue watching, guys, on this discussion.